You're watching College Sports Rushes the 10 on the Bet Rivers Network.
Welcome back to the 10, presented by Bet Rivers, a weekly Big Ten basketball podcast, part of the Bet Rivers Network. The NCAA tournament rolls on. Today we're taking a look at Friday's Big Ten action. I'm your host, Greg Waddell. I am joined by Troy Macker, Doug Kazarian. They're going to help me break down all of the action in our favorite conference to bet on. It's a pivotal point in the season. We've already got an episode out breaking down all of Thursday's games in this conference, 4 different handicaps and some best bets for you. Go check that out. But for today, we're going to jump right into our 4 Big Ten games for Friday, starting with a game that we don't know the final matchup for. We've got Illinois as the 6th seed, waiting to find out if they will take on Xavier or Texas. The results of that play-in game will determine the Illini's opponent. Obviously, we don't have spread information just yet, so we'll give you a general matchup breakdown of this. Doug, I'll throw it to you. Any thoughts on what would be favorable or unfavorable for the Illini here?
So I think the Illini are in trouble. I touched on it last week. I just think they're super inconsistent, and they are in love with the three-point line when they shouldn't be, and that's a concern of mine. I do think, and what the funny thing is, I would be unleashing fury if I thought their coach was weak. I'd be like, this guy's I don't understand, because I think Underwood's really solid. So I don't understand why there are, like a play dumb or at sometimes don't play their most intelligent basketball. But I do think the quick turnaround against, if I think Texas is poorly coached. So if it is Texas that advances, I think Underwood will have the advantage. But I think you have to think outside the box. Like, I know a lot of sharp guys out here who like Xavier in this matchup because they think the coaching edge in the play-in, the coaching edge and everything. But I think we have to be careful here. We haven't seen a conference like the SEC before, right? Record 14 teams in here. And these teams might be just so much better than we realize and battle tested, right? So yes, the metrics are the metrics, and the opponent adjusted efficiency and all that stuff. But there's just something different about this neutral site tournament and everything that's not going to be or visible through the conference play. So maybe Texas is like much better than we think, and they're just a notch below all the elite SEC teams. I mean, they played Tennessee tough during the regular season. They've had some tough games. They beat Florida, I believe. I'm sorry, I was talking about Missouri. But like teams like that might be just better than we think. So whoever advances, I'm probably going to bet against Illinois in this situation.
I think it's a fair read. They have been the most inconsistent team in the Big Ten Conference all season long. There's no doubt about that. For me, I tend to think gut feel wise, that inconsistency will manifest itself in one great performance in the NCAA tournament, because I don't look at Xavier or Texas and see teams that are overly resistant to what Illinois does do well. The one I think would scare me more if you're looking to back Illinois would be Xavier, just because Xavier is a phenomenal shooting team from outside. They make 39% of their threes, and they're also pretty great on the defensive boards. And that's an area that Illinois really thrives on, especially when their shots aren't going in. So I could see a world where Illinois isn't able to generate those second chances they normally do. Meanwhile, they're losing the three-point battle significantly, potentially. Ryan Conwell's a guy for Xavier who can take over a game. So I think if you're looking to talk yourself into the Illini doing what I think they will and win comfortably in the first matchup, you should be rooting for Texas to beat Xavier. I would love the Illini in that matchup. Texas, a very undisciplined basketball team. I think Illinois has just more talent than them, and when Illinois has been the more talented team, they've usually fared very well this season. To me, Xavier could make things a little more interesting. Probably not enough to push me off the Illini in round 1 anyway, but that's sort of my general stance on this. And then let's fade Illinois when we get into the second round, when they have to string 2 good performances together in a row. They haven't done that in over 2 months. Troy, probably hard to have any insights or trends when we don't know who the opponent is, but just any additional thoughts you could add for us?
Yeah, I think Doug's point is spot on in that we don't know what a middle of a pack of an elite conference looks like. That is to say that, we know that an 11 seed basically always advances from Dayton to win at least one game. And the times we've had 10, 11, 12 teams from a conference, a lot of times those conferences don't perform well. So if you are thinking Texas, there's reason to believe they might be better than either of the teams they play, or, they're just another team from another conference. And I do kind of agree that they are not the world's greatest coach team. I have been on Illinois for a while, but I also agree that, to Doug's point, they take a lot of threes that they shouldn't take. I mean, they were like 6 of 25 in the loss in the Big Ten tournament. But I think that the talent does play out. I do think Illinois has one of the more talented rosters in the field. But I'm very interested to see where bettors play this one based off the line, because it is becoming, with every year, more and more knowledge on 11s make it from Dayton to the second weekend. Deep runs. We see this. Will Illinois be a team that people are hammering on because they think the talent is there, or fading because Texas and Xavier, both name brands in college basketball, who can make waves in the tournament?
There's some funny just potential here too. Like, this is message board fodder, not betting insights, but it's long been rumored that Brad Underwood to Texas may happen one day. And it's also long been rumored that if that happened, Sean Miller would take over Illinois. So I just find it kind of funny that those three are all paired together in the same pod. Maybe we can all have a beer together after these games shake out. We'll see. All right, let's move to our first matchup that is solidified for Friday. We've got the 4-seeded Maryland Terrapins taking on Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon back in the NCAA tournament. This is a program that has had a bunch of success out in the Western Athletic Conference. Won a game in the NCAA tournament last year, beating St. Mary's in the first round. The line that we've got for this game is Maryland minus 10.5. You can get Grand Canyon 4-1 on the money line if you are interested. And our total is 150.5. Doug, what do you got?
If it weren't for High Point or San Diego, man, Grand Canyon would be a trendy team because they have Bryce Drew as their coach. Have a great home court advantage. It's a fun sort of school with a nice budget and all this stuff that you don't typically see at that level. I think Maryland's just going to be outclassing them. I really do. Grand Canyon's a nice team, and if it weren't going against Maryland or a team of that ilk, I would probably be backing them. And it's fun to say Lopes. I think Maryland's going to be too much. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago, Lenardi was talking about bracketology, saying Maryland was one of his 1 seeds, and my head was tilting. I was like, I don't see that, but Maryland, and we know. Right, the Crab Five, they have no depth and stuff like that. I don't think the depth or lack thereof is going to be an issue here. I think they're going to be a really tough team to face, so to speak, compared to what Grand Canyon's used to. And for what it's worth, it's a relatively early game. I don't know if that matters, and for a team like Grand Canyon coming from that side of the country, but this should be a Maryland 15-point win.
Yeah. So this game will be in Seattle, which is actually one note that I marked down because I'm worried Maryland might get a little PTSD from when they went to Washington earlier this season and lost a game. And look, Grand Canyon is not the Grand Canyon they were last year. But they are a program that I respect at this point. Tyon Grant-Foster is a legitimate mid-major superstar who can take over a game, that has the game experience in this tournament. Bryce Drew is a coach that I think just warrants your belief in games like this at this point, given his track record in the last couple of years. But to your point, Doug, every schematic element of this game favors Maryland. Like, there's just nothing that Grand Canyon does well that Maryland doesn't do better in the exact same category that goes against it. Grand Canyon's offense entirely dependent on getting to the free throw line, 7th nationally in free throw attempt rate. Maryland never fouls. It's a staple of their defense. They're so thin in terms of depth. They only play 5 guys that they have to avoid fouls. I mean, it's honestly a frustration point for me. Sometimes they'll just give up layups rather than fouling. And I think that's going to take away a big part of the Grand Canyon offense that relies on just getting guys in foul trouble and getting to the free throw line. On the other side, Grand Canyon's defense just wants to force turnovers. They're huge in terms of block and steal rates. They kind of jump around, try to overwhelm you with athleticism, but good luck with that against Maryland. They're bigger at basically every single position. They're a team that never turns the ball over. Their guard play has been great for the better part of the last month. So I will be honest with you guys, before the bracket was revealed, I actually was hoping to sell high on Maryland because I'm not a Kevin Willard guy, and I don't love that this team has 5 players. I think they're vulnerable in a tournament like this when that happens to foul trouble or to anything that goes wrong. But in this matchup, I think it's perfect for the Terps. It's a stay away for me at the number because I'm just not confident enough in general in Maryland to lay 10.5 against a program I respect. But I would not touch Grand Canyon. I don't think there's much realistic hope for them to make things interesting here. Troy, I'll throw it over to you. What trends do you have for us here?
Yeah, this should be a trendy spot for public backers of dogs, especially at 4-1. But that is not the case with the betting public. 71% of the money, 88% of the tickets on Maryland to win outright. Now, you are seeing money and tickets a slight lean towards Grand Canyon, 66% of the money, 58% of the tickets. I think because that is double digits. If it was a little bit closer, you'd probably see it the other way. 89% of the money and 80% of the tickets is on the over. Maryland, if 5 of their last 6 games, the under has hit. Now, those games have all been unders around 151, 152. This is 150.5. Now, because they only have 5 players and, tournament games are slower, tighter, those last 2 minutes could be very slow. And Grand Canyon does like to get to the foul line. This is a tricky game that could be right around the number. An interesting angle for me is Maryland has like 3 bad losses, and one's at the buzzer to Northwestern, and then they lost to Washington, and I guess at Oregon. Those are 2, and Oregon's not a bad loss, but they were road games out west. They've lost 8 games this year. All 8 are by 6 points or less. 4 of those games were at the buzzer, literally right at the buzzer. If this game is close, I would take a late flyer live money line on Grand Canyon simply because the Terps have had bad luck at the buzzer. And it wasn't just bad luck. I should correct myself because they gave up a horrible possession to Maryland at the end of the game. The Michigan State game, they botched that finish, taking a shot too early and allowing Trey Holloman to get to the half court and hit a shot. So they're not great when things break down in the last 5 or 6 seconds. So if it is, if you can get Grand Canyon 3-1 live late in the game, tight game, under a minute, under 2 minutes to go, I would jump on that simply because what we've seen the Terps happen to the Terps late in games this year. But I tend to believe that this is Maryland's game to win and should be a pretty comfortable win.
That's an interesting point, and I'm glad you made it, Troy, because I do think the narrative has been, they're just unlucky. Look at all these close losses. It's been mistakes from largely Jacoby Gillespie that has hurt them, and I just talked him up because he is a huge part of why they never turn the ball over, but he's just had some confounding, boneheaded type decisions that have cost them games, and it still takes luck to hit a half-court shot, but they never should have had the attempt. So I think that's a fair shot, an angle to keep in mind for sure as you're watching these games, and sometimes live betting is the best way to bet NCAA tournament games. Got to keep that in mind. Thank you, Troy. All right, let's move to our third game for Friday. We've got Michigan State on the 2 line taking on Bryant. Michigan State, let's not forget, lost as a 2 seed back in 2016, I believe, to Middle Tennessee State. So I think anytime Michigan State fans see a 2 next to their name at this time of year, they get a little spooked. But Bryant, major underdogs here, 17.5-point underdogs, 12-1 on the money line. And our total is high, 151.5, expecting a lot of points in this game. Doug, what are your thoughts here?
I don't think Bryant belongs. They're not very good. I know a couple sharp guys who are unloading against them, taking the 7.5 or 8.5 in the conference title game on Saturday. That did not get there. Bryant won by double digits, but this is not exactly not all these let's say 13 or higher. Not all those 13 or higher sort of teams are created equal. I think this Bryant team has a lot more warts than we're used to seeing. Sometimes and we've talked about it on the show, just some teams are just physically outmatched and stuff like that. I just don't think Bryant's that good of a team. And now they have a total step up in class. It is March. You have Izzo. And to your point, he has laid an egg before in the first round. It's a lot of points, but I have a feeling this could be an absolute rout. So if I had to play it, it's just, with these kind of things, the second unit for Sparty can just roll. And unless some guy catches fire or something and is just carrying a team for a half and then some, maybe 30, this should be a blowout. Michigan State is too talented and too physical and too good to let Bryant hang around for 40 minutes.
Yeah, the total seems incredibly high, and I almost want to just auto take the under here because I also see a blowout coming, but I see a blowout in the fashion of Bryant scoring 46 points in this game. And as good as Michigan State can be in transition, they've got to almost want to run it up to get there in this game, I think. And I don't know if they will. It might be one of those times where you rest a Jace Richardson late and it just make sure everybody's healthy and keep it going. I did look back through some Michigan State games as sizable favorites in recent years in the first round. And there's a mixed bag. There's been some blowouts, but usually they've been pretty stellar defensive performances. And I think on the profile in this game, Bryant really doesn't have much to like other than they're going to play a frantic tempo, 7th fastest tempo in the sport. They've got Earl Timberlake, who was a high major player back in Miami. There's reasons to believe he's not going to be spooked by the physicality of Michigan State's team. But to me, you don't really want to encourage Michigan State to get out and run when you're just smaller and significantly less talented at every position. So I see a Michigan State blowout happening as well. For that reason, I am going to have Michigan State minus 17.5 on my card. And I just keep staring at that total at 151.5. I think I have to add the under as well. I don't think Bryant is going to get beyond mid-50s in this game, and that's a lot of points that Michigan State's going to need, even with a cover involved. Troy, I'll throw it to you. What do you have for us from an insights perspective?
Yeah, well, we'll stay with the over-under. 54% of the money is on the over. That's basically split right now. 72% of the tickets is on the under as well. As we've discussed on previous shows, Michigan State plays to the under better than any team in the country, really. 11 and 22 of those games hitting the under. However, of those 11 games, 6 of them went to the over when the over was 151 or higher. So more than half of their hits on the over are when they're actually really high over-under game totals. And I think there were 9 games that they played this year in which the over-under was 151 or higher, and they hit in 6. Now, the issue is, can Bryant score? Bryant has conceded 79 or fewer points in 12 straight games. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I expect Michigan State to score in the 70s, even though they typically don't. It's what can Bryant do on the other end? And they really have not performed well against high major competition at all this year, even to the point where they were almost double dipped by Grand Canyon. It was like a 55-point loss. I believe they lost by 25 or 30 to St. John's. I want to take Bryant here because I watched them play in their conference tournament and they played exceptionally well. They have some metrics that are nice. Michigan State plays very slow. That is not my favorite thing come tournament time. And I do tend to like to fade the January, February Izzo belief, mainly because of that Middle Tennessee game. Here's an interesting trend that leans to your underplay. Each of Michigan State's last 7 NCAA tournament games against lower seeds, so typically first and second round games, have produced a total of 147 or fewer. That's 4.5 points under the current game line. So this trend says that it's going to be more than one possession lower than what it's predicted at. And Bryant does not score points against high majors. So I think this is going to be a very interesting one. The public is on Michigan State to win. There's not a lot of money or tickets on Bryant, as you'd expect, although 12-1 is nice. And then on spread, 54% of the money and 80% of the tickets on Michigan State. I think some people are buying the Bryant early, but this is a game that Michigan State should win and should win comfortably.
Yeah. All right. Not a lot of concern for the Spartans is what you're hearing from our panel here. Let's go to our final game for Friday. The Oregon Ducks, 6.5-point favorites against Liberty. Liberty plus 240 at Bet Rivers on the money line. Our total is 139.5. If you did want Oregon just to win this game, it's minus 305 on the money line. Maybe something to put into a parlay or lay the number if you're feeling risky here. Doug, what do you like in this matchup?
Yeah. So I talked about Bryant and some of the other teams that we've mentioned not fitting the profile, but Liberty certainly does. And this number's been bet up a little bit to 6.5. I think that's respect for the Ducks and there's just size and shooting and everything like that with Biddle and then the outside. And Dana Altman. Dana Altman is not a guy I want to bet into, but this Liberty team is solid with both offensively and defensively, the metrics. And that's what has me really intrigued in this game. I'm going to bet I like the under the most. I think Liberty's D can do enough to disrupt the Oregon offense, and I think they'll be methodical both ends. I just feel like this is a high number, all things considered, for a game that. And these are tricky. These are tricky because there's obviously the second half total is much higher than the first half because of foul. But sometimes you get a game and you get no fouls, even in a close game, because just the way the shot clock, game clock, and the margin. Sometimes it's a one possession game and teams don't want to foul. They'll play it out. Even if it's a two possession game, you may not get that many fouls. So that's a little bit of a crapshoot. So I don't fixate on that too much. But I'm on the under here. It's just going to be a really tight game. A lot of times we see games in the tournament become tighter and tighter as the game goes on. Some teams play not to lose, where the crowd sort of starts to rally. I think this has all the makings of a situation like that, where the Flames are going to hang around, and it's just going to be one of those where I don't think Oregon's going to be able to pull away. So I lean dog, even though I don't really want to bet against Altman, but I'm on the under here.
Yeah, Liberty is a very interesting team because they have a profile just as a style of play standpoint that I love. They are a team that shoots a bunch of threes, shoots them well, and takes away opponents shooting threes and guards the three-point line well. This team is 5th nationally in three-point percentage shooting. They make 40% of their threes. And they're 3rd nationally in three-point percentage defense. Opponents shoot 28% from three. That's mathematically a great way to win basketball games. Over the course of the season, they only played 2 top 100 opponents, 2-0 outright in those games. They beat Kansas State and McNeese on a neutral. Obviously, Kansas State did not play out into being a very good basketball team, but McNeese did, and Liberty got them back in November. So I believe this team has exactly what you're looking for in an underdog to pull an upset in March. My problem is, just like you mentioned, Doug, I never really want to fade Dana Altman in the NCAA tournament. I certainly don't want to fade Jackson Shellstad in the NCAA tournament. I think he's an incredibly clutch player, and I expect this to be a close game. I don't really see this a game Liberty will create much separation with Nate Biddle inside, and it's one I'd be uncomfortable at betting Oregon. I think for that reason, I am going to take Liberty to cover the 6.5. You go through Oregon as well. They rank very highly this season in Ken Palm's luck metric, which is something that we've associated with Michigan, right? They've won all these close games. We haven't really talked about it with Oregon much. Oregon's been luckier on this course of the season, the full season, than Michigan has. They've been the luckiest team in Big Ten. And that luck metric, what it really is just a determination of, are you winning close games or are you winning by comfortable margins? Oregon has won a bunch of close games. They've won 3 overtime games this season. Down the stretch in that 8-game win streak that they had, they beat Northwestern at home by 6, Iowa by 2, Wisconsin and Washington in overtime. Indiana, they ended up winning by 9, but it was a tie game with 2 minutes left. I mean, they just do not create much separation, even against some of the bottom dwellers of the Big Ten. So given Liberty's profile, I feel comfortable enough taking the points here. I'm not bold enough to take Liberty money line, even though I think there's a case for it when it requires you to fade Dana Altman in March. Troy, what insights can you add for us?
Now, we have to remember with this game being the last game on Friday, it is still early time of recording. The money is still going to come in. The tickets is still going to come in. So a lot of the percentages for those late night games are going to be very strong because there haven't been bet on both sides. That's why 85% of the money and 60% of the tickets are on Liberty to pull off the upset, straight up. 92% of the money and 78% of the tickets are on Liberty to cover 6.5. And 93% of the money and 90% of the tickets are on the over. To Doug's point about the under here, all the trends and the money and tickets are suggesting over. Oregon has scored 76 points or more in 11 straight games against non-conference opponents. They've won 11 straight games against non-conference opponents. 12 of their last 13 games against non-con opponents on a neutral court have produced a total of 141 or more, and it's right now at 139. So it's very interesting that you're thinking the unders to play here. It is going to be the last game. They're going to have to wait longer. It could potentially, if you're the 4th game on that court, You could be playing an hour and a half after when you're supposed to, given if there's a double overtime game before or whatnot. Liberty is 20-10 against the spread. And they, like to Greg's point, they do have 2 good wins. I'm surprised that I know it's early, but I'm surprised there's this strong of backing on Liberty this year when, they were darlings 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the media really got behind them as a contender to win a couple games, where this year I think they're still a very good team. Oregon is on a hot streak. But I'm a little bit surprised to see how strong the public is getting on them early, but I do think that is going to come down to earth a little bit as we get closer to tip.
Yeah, it's a fair read. I'm excited for that game. As we talk through it, it truly does feel like one of the games where I could see a variety of different outcomes, but almost all of them point to it being a competitive final possession type game. Should be interesting. All right, that is it for the Friday slate in the Big Ten. Doug, let's go back through this slate and basically each give our favorite bet of the day. What's your best bet for Friday?
Oh, man. This is a tough slate. I'm going to go with the under in this Liberty-Oregon game. I really do think it's going to be a super tight Duck squad. Remember, Troy touched on it, just the last game of the first round, right? So just think about the chaos that's going to have already occurred and ensued, and then the Ducks are just going to be sort of feel like they're pushing a boulder up the mountain. In my eyes, just emotionally, just knowing that. Let's say there's a handful of upsets by the time they tip off over the course of Thursday and Friday. They just know the risk factor. Altman will have them ready and all that. I just think it's going to be a tight game and really well played defensively by Liberty.
Yeah. All right. Well, it makes sense, I think, then that I'm in the same game for my best bet here. I'm going to take the Liberty plus 6.5 as my favorite bet of the day. I will say, this Friday slate is tough, as you alluded to.
Yes.
I do not see obvious value as much here as we have in a couple games on Thursday. So if you haven't heard the full episode of the 10 for Thursday slate, you're listening to this before the games start, go check that out as well. We've got a full breakdown of every Big Ten game and our best bets for each. We hope you enjoy the NCAA tournament as much as we will. It's been really fun to work with these guys for a bunch of betting previews for the 10 this year. Make sure as well, go to Bet Rivers, check out the house specials page, get daily boosted best bets and special props for the NCAA tournament. That does it for another episode of the 10. Stay tuned for more as the NCAA tournament moves on.
Thanks for watching College Sports Rushes the 10 on the Bet Rivers Network.